Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Development Insights podcast, where we bring you ideas, experiences, and best practices from the real estate development industry. My name is Payam Salahi. I'm the president of Dena Project Management, a construction and project management firm that helps developers define, design, and deliver successful projects. My guest for this episode is Arash Shahi, PhD, PEng, and PMP. Lots of credentials behind your name, Arash. We're going to ask you to expand on that in a second. He is the Chief Executive Officer of LandLogic. He has been named top 40 under 40 in Canadian construction. He's also a co-founder and associate director of Building Innovation Research Center, BERC, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I hope so. And then he's also co-founder and CEO of ACO Innovation Lab, which we're going to dive into all of those things in this episode. As always, you can find all the relevant information about our guest and this episode on our website, realestatedevelopmentinsights.com. And please remember to subscribe to our show and help us grow the show. Enjoy listening. Thank you, Arash, for being here. How's it going today?
Of course, thanks for having me. Good to see you, Payam. Oh, it's going well. Glad to be
Thank
here.
you.
Excited about this
Thank
conversation.
You. Fantastic. So let's start from top. I just read your little bit of a high-level biography of you that I have. You've been busy. You've been busy. You've done quite a bit. So you're a very active person. Obviously, you and I have known each other for a while. But walk us through that, maybe color between the lines a little bit, and who's Arash, and we start from there.
Sure, absolutely. I've been in real estate for about 20 years. My co-founder calls me a prof and a realtor. There's been definitely a mixed background there. So yeah, I've been in real estate for about 20 years, just over 20 years. I studied civil engineering. That was my background. Gonna get into construction management. Worked in academia for a while. I did all my studies at Waterloo. But I ended up at U of T for about 6 years, and a research center around building innovations, as you said. And then about 5.5 years ago, as COVID hit, we came out of U of T and started ACO Innovation Lab. And the reason for that was basically we saw a need in earlier stage venture studio, a vertically focused earlier stage venture studio. The challenge that we had at U of T was a lot of startups would come to us. They basically had a solution looking for a problem. And that just seemed very counterintuitive. So what we decided to do was we have a lot of problems in our industry and in our government related to our industry. So the thought process was that let's start with the industry, let's start with the government, let's understand what are the gaps that exist. And only if we get validation from the industry and government that they're going to use something, then we go ahead and build it. So that's how we differentiate a venture studio than an incubator, right? Incubator, you come to the incubator with your startup and your co-founder and say, hey, help me get this to market. With a venture studio, we're working with the industry first and government first and trying to understand what are the gaps. And then we build a venture and then start to bring founders that make sense on top of that venture. So we commit to the venture, not to the founders. That was the philosophy that we had. So over the last 5-6 years, we put out about 6 startups out of ACO Innovation Lab. I'm happy to talk about a number of them. The first startup actually was a good story.
Sure.
The OBOA, the Ontario Building Official Association, came to us and said, we've been asking the government to digitize the Ontario Building Code for 10 years. Can you guys do it? And we just took the position of we are the digitization partner of the industry. So someone comes to us and says, can you digitize a PDF? We can't say no. So we said, of course, we say yes. And then we realized why nobody else had done it. So
why was that?
There was a lot of, as there is in our industry, there's a lot of red tape everywhere. So we had, I lost track of dozens and dozens of meetings with different levels of government just to get the rights to digitize the Ontario Building Code. So we did that, and that's a story maybe for another podcast. And then we rolled out, at the time it was called My Building Code, is now called Tracks Codes. That was our first startup that kind of got out of the program. They've now digitized the national building codes, fire codes, energy codes, and they now have AI installed on top of the application. So it was a success story for us. And it's been a talented team of founders that are running Tracks. And it's just been a pleasure. So that was our first startup that came out.
So before you move on from that, let me double click on that. You're digitizing a very large set of documents, which it's relatively static. It doesn't change every 3 months. It changes every few years or every few decades in some instances. And who's the ideal, like what need were you, because you started by saying that you guys are working the other way around. You're going to the market saying, what do you need? Let us fill a gap there. What need were you filling there? As someone who has used building code in the past, I have an idea of what you're doing, but walk us through it. What void were you filling? What need were you addressing?
That's a good question. So there was an immediate need, and the immediate need was digital access to the codes, right?
Okay.
Digital access, not here's a link of a 2,000 page PDF that you can scroll through. Like a digital access, meaning something you can search, something you can save, something you can put digital tabs on, something that you can eventually build logic on top of.
Okay.
So that's what we did. The idea was digitize access, so easy access to the code. And now that you have digitized access, it now unlocks a whole bunch of other opportunities. So you can now run AI on top of the code. You can ask questions, which Track has done. So you can have a conversation with the building code. You don't have to go flip pages. And then the next phase of that is, okay, now can we automate compliance? One of the research projects I was involved with at Waterloo, we worked with the city of Waterloo and Rolf Kaminsky, the chief building official at the time, to see if we can use, at the time, I forget what the platform was called, but we were trying to use one of the platforms to do an automated code compliance using BIM. And one of the challenges we got, that this is going back over 10 years ago now, the challenge was that the building code, for building code to be able to automatically apply, the BIM file had to be standardized, BIM submission, but also the provisions of the code had to be digitized in a machine readable format. So that's the original idea of, okay, if you want to go down the automation path, first you have to digitize. And that's what we did with the initial version of the building code, that's in Trax code. And now the roadmap of that, okay, now you can submit your BIM model. We can do automatic
building blocks to building something larger
Exactly.
and a wider view. And going back to the whole red tape that you just mentioned, you got me thinking. So in my world, the building code is the Bible, where we have, when we build the building code, the building inspectors, when they want to sign off and say, here is your permission to occupy a space, authority to occupy, as they call it right now. Everything goes by the building code, or someone who has the authority to override portions of the building code. Just a random question here. Yeah. How liable is this platform if something goes wrong?
Define liability.
In other words, am I going to look at the platform? Am I going to be, this is as good as it gets? Or do I have to also go and check the paper copy and make sure that there's no gap between?
So from a legal standpoint, the disclaimer is always go check, because that's how lawyers going to get around this kind of conversations. But the reality is, when we first digitized the Ontario Building Code, we sent a document back to ministry, mistakes in the code, right?
Interesting.
Because it's, once you digitize it, then you can actually analyze it. In the Ontario Building Code that was printed for many years, there were numbering issues with the provisions of the code that we then identified and reported back.
Interesting.
So it kind of works both ways. Yes, there could be challenges. Obviously, with any sort of technology, there are going to be risks and whatnot. But considering where technology is today, those risks are very limited. We're never going to go out and say, oh, don't ever look at the building code, just use the app. The reality of it is that in many cases you're doing that today already. So I'll give you another example. When we did a lot of work with e-permitting systems, so with digital submission of documents, and the first thing municipalities always came back with is, we can't put our data on the cloud. That's just risky. Like, where is your banking information today? Right? You have a mobile app on your phone and you're doing everything with your money on your mobile. Everything is online. So why does building permit, like, what's the problem with building permits? And then another way to look at it is, like, where are the papers today? And then the answer is, there are these warehouses, these huge warehouses that have paper going all the way to the ceiling. With a match, the whole thing could go up in the smoke. So it's all relative when you talk about security, and what is your benchmark? What are you comparing with? And then, because if you're comparing with you flipping through hundreds of pages and finding things,
that's what you used to be doing.
Then compared to that benchmark, it's actually pretty
Yeah.
accurate.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I hear you loud and clear. Going back to what you were saying about not basically starting with a solution, looking for a problem, going the other way, which I believe is also the right way, is find a problem, trying to solve it. How did you come up with this list of six? We talked about one. You mentioned that someone approached you and say, "Here's a need we have, digitize the code for us." What was the second and third one, and do you have a process of coming up with that?
Yeah, our focus has been on obviously housing and real estate development. Housing has been a big issue federally, provincially, municipally for as long as I've been around. When I first started at U of T, the continuation of my PhD was to bring in technology into construction. So I wanted to fly drones through and do beam integrations and 4D and 5D and 6D beam and all that. But we then started talking to the industry, and the feedback was, Arash, we know how to build our buildings. If you really want to help, get us our permits faster because we are sitting on $10 million, $50 million assets for 8 years. If you really want to make an impact, solve that problem. So for the 4 or 5 years at U of T, we had a research team of about 7, 8 students, and they were looking at international best practices of how every other jurisdiction is looking at land development, both from an industry side, but also from a government side. What technologies are in place? What process did they go through to get to where they are, and what are the lessons learned? So we compiled all of that, and when we started Eco Innovation Lab, we're going to continue some of that research into a project that was called One Ontario.
Sorry to interrupt you. So far, basically, what you've done is you have started the global or international benchmarking. Or is
Best
that a fair
practices, yeah.
way of saying? Yes,
Benchmarking and
best
best
practice.
practices.
Gotcha.
At the time I was at U of T, we talked to the Minister of Housing and said, this is what the rest of the world is doing. And then there was a lot of appetite from Ontario because we put all the e-permitting systems into 4 categories of maturity. And with Ontario being level 0 to level 1. And then the feedback was, can we jump levels? Like, yes, fantastic, let's do that. So anyway, when we started ACO, we put an initiative together called One Ontario. It's now operating as a non-for-profit. So one of our initiatives actually turned into a non-for-profit. We got backing from 40 different agencies in Ontario, including the Residential Construction Council, RESCON, to OBOA, even MPAC, Real Estate, TREP, Toronto Real Estate Board. About 40 different agencies backed it. And the idea was open data exchange standards, because that was one of the outcomes of the research we'd done, in that if you want to have, in other jurisdictions, they push for 2 things. One, a centralized system. So upper tier government needs to step in and put a central system in place. And then you need to have open data exchange standards so that external solutions can hook up to this centralized system, because there is the ecosystem of solutions are changing very rapidly. So for municipalities to even assess all these technologies and then be able to adopt and test them takes a lot of cycles. So the best practice is that upper tier government puts a central system in place and opens it up with open data exchange standards that other solutions can hook into very easily. So that was the best practice. Unfortunately, the province of Ontario has yet to adopt that, and despite the buy-in, but we got some buy-in from the federal government, from
But when you say buying, is that a form of like funding, or was that a form of like a general
it's
agreement that
not
we
just
might look at
funding.
it?
It's not just funding. We have 440 municipalities in Ontario, right?
Yeah.
Every municipality is out there trying to buy an e-permitting solution. So the vendors are loving it. They're selling the same solution 400 times, and every time charging different kind of money, from subscription to implementation, you name it. And government wants to digitize permitting. So what they're doing is that they're putting money to municipalities. Municipalities go out with no direction, go buy whatever you can buy and implement. With a fraction of that money, the province of Ontario could have put a provincial permitting system in place that has some consistency over the entire jurisdiction. That requires leadership, vision that just hasn't been there in Ontario. That said, we got approached by the Minister of Housing in BC a couple of years ago, and they said, what is this One Ontario thing that you're building? We keep hearing about it. So we walked them through what it is, and the BC government decided to do it. So they decided to put together a permitting hub that they're in development now. The challenge there was that they decided to build software, and we've kind of seen what governments building software has turned into in the past. One government listens to one thing, and another
Oh,
government
so they're not using your system, the one Ontario. They're taking the idea and basically trying to do it in house.
yeah, they said I'm on their advisory board. They're trying to sell. They're trying to now develop software. That was the battle that we don't develop software. Software works at the scale. Software needs to be repeatable. If you build software for one jurisdiction, yes, you can build it, but who's going to maintain it, and who's going to make sure that your software is now up to date with everything else that's happening in the world? So that was a lost battle there. But point being that a provincial level permitting system is basically what One Ontario as a non-for-profit is advocating for, as well as an open data exchange of standards. Because one other thing is that municipalities get locked into these vendor specific solutions, and there's a handful of vendors in the market with a lot of market share. But because they're vendor specific, then it's a very closed system innovation can get into. So what's happening in Europe and the rest of the world are open data exchange standards. So when you talk about BIM, for example, there's IFC standards that are getting adopted. No government will ever buy a solution that's an Autodesk only solution. So an IFC based.
That makes
But
sense.
but in Canada, again, a lot of things are backwards. This is one of them.
We're a little
One on
bit
top.
slow to adapt. Maybe you can say, okay, so
That's a good way to put it.
yeah, let me put this in context because you come from a very technical background for yourself. But basically, from my layman perspective, you're saying if we want to if we ever want to solve at least or remediate or mitigate our issues with the permitting and approval process, and if which I believe it is, one of the tools is to digitize it and have it go through a smart system, use AIs and new technologies. We need some centralized thinking and methods and standards so then we can gain the scale of basically forcing everyone's hand to do it rather than everyone trying to solve it on their own. And that's just a big elephant at this point to move. Do I get it?
That's exactly it. Like you can't expect 440 municipalities to solve problems by themselves. They don't even have jurisdiction. In development, sometimes MTO gets involved, conservation authority gets involved. There's 15 different agencies that might get involved on one application. The municipality itself doesn't even have jurisdiction. The entity that has jurisdiction is the province of Ontario.
I guess you can somehow say that this kind of investment or this kind of leadership or direction is no different than starting a new road or new highway setup. That yes, a lot of smaller municipalities, a lot of different stakeholders are going to benefit from it, but it will take much bigger might and power and willingness from a able and competent body, which in this case is the province, because the municipalities are the creations of the province.
That's exactly it. To work with that example, it's like when you're building the 401, right?
Yeah.
It's like telling every municipality, go build your own section with lanes that you want, with whatever kind of lighting that you want, with whatever. You're going to end up with a system that doesn't work. That's a very good example. It's an infrastructure. It's not a physical infrastructure, but it's a digital infrastructure.
And that's where I was going with this. It almost sounds to me, and as I'm thinking with you about this, is that it's almost like a mindset paradigm shift that yes, you're buying software, but you're not buying, or you're developing, standards. But this is not just another subscription that you pay $5 a month, and you forget about it, or $5,000 or $5 million a month, whatever that price tag is. You're actually investing in an infrastructure which will probably take 5 years to implement and debug, and then it hopefully can run for in cycles of 5 years. Because I don't know what the next topic of our conversation is going to be AI, and some people think by 2027 the world is going to come to an end because of AI.
I still remember the Y2K years, and nothing actually happened. So no, we'll get there. But bottom line, I think the takeaway is digital infrastructure needs to be treated as such. It's infrastructure. And with any sort of infrastructure, you need upper tier governments to step in and build the systems on top of which everybody else can connect to. That's essentially what it is. And kind of brings us to land logic, which is basically our solution infrastructure problem. So with land logic, we basically pulled together all the different data sets that are openly available. Now, some of them there's different versions of available. Some data sets are open on OpenGIS portals. You can just grab that data through an ETL tool. But in some other cases, zoning data, for example, was another example that, yes, it's open data, but it's couple hundred pages of PDF attached with a number of different maps. So good luck. It's open data, but having had the experience we had with the building code, in Land Logic, we decided to digitize all the planning policy documents. So we've digitized zoning bylaws for over 60 municipalities in Ontario so far.
Interesting.
Official plans, secondary plans, and then we started bringing in all the conservation layers, so floodplains, woodlands, wetlands, and then we brought in demographic data, and then we started to talk to different developers and, okay, what else do you want? So long story short, we have about 70, 80 different types of data and over 1,000 different data sets that we've now compiled together. One of the challenges we had was, of course, when it comes to zoning, one municipality calls something a single family house, another one is a single family dwelling, another one is home. So that normalization takes a lot of effort, and that's basically part of the core of Land Logic is that data normalization layer. But now that we have that data of our built environment, if you will, and planning policy to be specific, what can be built where, right? Now we're starting to build solutions on top of it. So we have one developer that came to us and said, my focus is sixplexes in City of Toronto. And every time I have to go to an architect, can I pay several $100, like $1,500 to $2,000 to tell me whether I can build a 5-plex or 6-plex in this slot or not? Can you guys do it? So we started looking at the reports that are out there. Yeah, we have this data. So we now built a tool. You put your address, it spins off whether you can build a 5-plex or a 6-plex or not. So these are the kind of application layers that now can be, we have a centralized data set in place. So if that provincial permitting system ever gets undergo, then we can connect our data to it. So Land Logic is
together.
Land Logic is the data provider for all intelligent and artificial intelligent applications out there. There's a lot of AI talk, and I'm sure we're going to get to that at some point, that everybody wants to build their own AI, conversational or otherwise. But AI is as good as the data that you can feed into the AI. So, of course, ChatGPTs of the world, there's a lot of data out there. So they grab the data, they've made everything, revolutionized a whole bunch of things. But when it comes to our industry, our data is not available to ChatGPT or anybody else.
Zoning that might be a good thing. That might eventually save us from going unemployed for a lot of us. But yeah,
well, except Land Logic has now digitized it. So AI is
so you're working with the enemy.
You got to pick your battles. So the idea is, in order to enable AI in our industry, we had to standardize, normalize, and structure our data, because this whole fragmentation, you've heard of it.
Right.
So anyway, what Land Logic is, that data backbone, intelligent data backbone, on top of which you can now build solutions, either for yourself, for your own company, or if you're a startup that wants to service a sector of the industry, it makes the same way it doesn't make sense for municipalities individually to go assess e-permitting solutions, because that takes a lot of cycles. For the same reason, it doesn't make sense for every software solution, every developer, every builder, every agent to go in and put together that infrastructure data layer. You have that set up, you can now come connect to it, do whatever you want to do at the application layer. And there's a lot of no-code, low-code solutions out there that basically, in not too distant future, can basically build solutions with a prompt. So you can, that application layer, you can replicate very quickly, but you need to still feed that application layer with data. And that's where Land Logic kind of comes in.
So you basically have created some sort of a hub which has done a lot of legwork for people who want to basically use the data to create, call it knowledge or wisdom or whatever the layer is above that. But I want to double click on Land Logic, because I think frankly, that lines up more with what we focus on a daily basis, and potentially a lot of our audience will like. So a whole bunch of different questions. One is, who's the ideal user for that platform? Is that designed for an architect slash developer, or architect slash planner, or someone who is not very familiar with something? I want to pick up a piece of land. I just know that there's a lot at the corner of my street there. I want to see if I can do a 6+1 or 5+1 or whatever. Who's your target? Who's the best person to use it?
It's a good question, and it's evolving. So we built the platform with the developers and the realtors in mind. So that was originally our target audience, was to give developers tools that they can use to do their work better. There is the psychological, or I said philosophical discussion here from a technology provider, and that is, do you sell technology to dinosaurs and let them fight, or do you go in with the technology and take over the dinosaurs? Right. So that's a fundamental question that a lot of tech
Okay.
providers have to answer.
I'm hoping you're going to clarify who's the dinosaur very quickly.
So the idea is our industry as a whole is an it's a dinosaur industry. Let's be
Okay.
real, right?
Okay.
When it comes to other industries, and I would put the pin on the government first, because you have designers that are designing in 3D BIM environments. You have builders who are looking at what are the innovative ways that they can build, and then you want a permit, print 3 copies and put a USB on top and give it to me. So
Amen to that last one. Yes.
so I think, so when it comes to dinosaurs, I think I put the blame on government, and this is where it's important to look at best practices. In UK, when you look at the BIM implementation, the government came out and said, "Here is my roadmap, 6 stages of BIM adoption. At every stage, here's what's going to happen. Projects above this size have to be BIM, and then you have to submit in BIM. And then here is the funding I'm going to put in place to educate the entire industry of how you're going to get there." That's called leadership from the top. In Canada, it's like, they call it the middle out approach, which really means no leadership. It's like, you just go and do what you want to do. I'm going to accept paper because I can, right? Because
Okay.
so that mentality has
That's
to change,
it's a
right?
very inefficient way of doing things, but yes. Okay.
That mentality has to change, and it only changes with a hammer. There is enough pressure we put on our industry to digitize and innovate. It's time for our government to step forward. It's like, enough is enough. Like, somebody needs to out there and just say, guys, enough is enough. If I'm designing in BIM, some pilots with municipalities and to show them what happens when they submit BIM. It was fascinating. So in one case, it was like, okay, so show us through so we mapped out internal municipal processes against planning, building, and engineering departments across the province, several municipalities. So drawing comes in, and then they start highlighting with different colors the firewall ratings, right? So that when the inspector goes out, they can know what firewall they're checking. So working with our BIM consultants, they're like, I didn't know you're doing that. I can give an export because I have this in BIM. I can give you an export. I can choose those colors for you. You don't have to sit down and do this. So this as simple as that. Like, it's already there.
Yeah.
But
And I want to interject there, sorry, because I want to make sure, like, from this side of the table, from the dinosaur industry, if you may, I want to also say that, to your point, we have a lot of smart people who are at the very cutting edge of the technology, working in construction, working in design. They know the insides and outs of all these softwares and platforms and tools that you were just referring to. And I would like to think, because I've dealt with a lot of people who work for the municipalities, and they're very smart people as well. And it's almost like, I hate to use this analogy, but this is the one that comes to my mind right now, is that I have small kids, and sometimes you have very interesting, good kids all in the playground, and you just need an adult to break the ice and make them, put them in formation and make them play a team sport or so, basketball or whatever. Like, you just need an adult to come in. So now I'm coming on board with you, saying, yes, I see where you're going through the whole leadership discussion. We just need someone to come in and say, because you're absolutely right. We do a lot of things, and then at the end of the day, it comes to a one-page letter that doesn't really capture everything we just did. So it then goes in circles, and then, oh, did you submit that? And did you? Oh, we're losing. We just literally recently, a couple of weeks ago, we went through a submission from with one of the municipalities, and one of the pages of one of the files, for whatever reason, did not attach or did not deliver through that email chain, and that one page basically created a resubmission of the application, which pushed everything back by 6 weeks. Which it wasn't the first email. Somehow it fell off the grid. Sorry, I just want to interject and say, I want to defend our dinosaur industry. We have a lot of smart players who do want to do this, and I believe they're both on both sides, like on the design and private side and on the municipality side. But I believe this is where you were originally talking about, that they need a standard way of talking to each other.
I think adult in the room is the best way to put it. I really like that analogy,
Right.
because to your point, there are municipalities who are trying to push the boundaries. And you got to think about from their perspective too. With the rate technology is changing, expecting individual municipalities to even assess out there, it's a big task. So
Yeah.
why not have that provincially and say, hey, we've looked at these solutions, we've validated these five, we've made sure they all work together. Okay, go take your pick.
Right.
But if you use any of these five, at least they connect. And we as the province can actually look at what's happening, because that's the other interesting part of this story. Province is paying for all these tools to be bought by municipalities, yet the province has no visibility into what's happening in the province because none of those systems actually talk to each other or report up in any shape or form. So
Interesting.
it's just that adult in the room. I think I'm going to use that. I'm going to borrow that from you because
But
we
and
really,
I just want to make sure I'm clear. I don't mean that in a bad way. We don't we deal with people in the industry. Everyone's involved by themselves. We just mean like we need some sort of an icebreaker, bring it together. I think it's adults in the room or the leadership that we need to happen here.
I think
Lem-
it's adult in the room that actually have authority they're willing to exercise, right?
right.
Because it's not
Yes.
just let's play together, right? It's like
Yeah.
thou shalt do this because that's what it's going to take.
We're
And I
here to
think at
play
some
basketball
point
here, and that's what we're going to play today.
there are rules and this is what we're going to do and this is the objective and let's go get it, right? And it
Right.
has to be competitive. It has to be, this is why public-private partnerships matter, right? You need to enable the private sector to actually play in this area. Whenever private sector has been allowed to go in, there's competition, there's international and national competition that can go in, right? But when you've put the walls so high, right, on the procurement, on the government side, that nobody can get in, the only five are the Deloittes and the KPMGs and the big five that keep giving same consultations to every municipality.
400
And
times.
the
400
400
times.
and nothing changes. Anyway, long story. Going back to our discussion side, that was a button for
No,
me.
that was a good segue. We talked about the whole building of an infrastructure in the road, and we talked about the kids and adults in the room. I want to go back to the whole AI discussion, right? And there's a whole. Let me ask you this first before we move into the details. Is AI going to replace all of our jobs?
We have to be honest about this, right? There are jobs that are going to go away. There's no way around it, right? If your job is a repetitive task that requires no human intervention of any scale, it will have to go away, right? If you're an Uber driver, if you're a taxi driver, if you're a truck driver, it will go away, right? It's happening, right? It's happening and it's going to happen in our lifetime. But the amount of opportunities that exist, the amount of things that you can do differently or different things that you can do that you weren't able to do before, it's just so exciting. And I think yes, our jobs are going to go away, but there's going to be more jobs that are going to get. And I think the Y2K is a good example. Like, I remember the 2000 time. I moved here in 99. So I was right in the middle of it when they were saying, oh, the banks are going to shut down overnight. And then there was the whole idea, oh, computers are going to take over. And they haven't, right?
Right.
There's jobs that they're doing better. And I think AI is going to go a lot faster. So I don't think that's a fair comparison. But agentic AI is a thing. There are companies now selling agentic AI, right? So are we going to have a building official agenting AI? Are we going to have a designer agenting AI? The answer is probably yes. Then there are companies that are building towards that, right? So that's happening.
Let me take that because that's actually exactly where I wanted to go with this is that as an industry in construction, in real estate development, and pretty much, I want to say, as a branch of asset management, if you may, on a bigger scale. Unfortunately, like it or not, we work in a risk management business. It's all about liability. It's all about breaking up risk to a million different pieces. So, me as a construction manager, I'm responsible for certain risks. The architect is responsible for certain other risks. Structural engineer is responsible for, and so come and like it will just trickle down the whole team. Like everyone is responsible for a certain amount of risk within their scope, or there's really no room for them. So where does that, and that's the question that I have been dealing with, because like I can see, to your point, a lot of repetitive task is gonna potentially get replaced as it is right now. Like even for us in construction, there are certain tasks that we already are using AI for. But And we all know, at least at this point in time, AI does make mistakes, does hallucinate. And frankly, personally, I still rather double check everything after I use AI. One, is this, call it downside, going to go away at a certain point in the future, in the near future? Two, what do you think that eventual future will look like in terms of liability?
It's a good question. I think we need to understand what we know of AI today is very different than what AI is going to be in 5 years or 10 years. So when people talk about jobs being replaced, is not with the current AI, is with where AI is going. So you need to understand the rapid pace at which it's evolving and how much computing power cost is coming down. It's that future that we're talking about. Now, the future could be 5 years or 15 years. It probably be closer to 5 than 15. But that's a point where real job loss is going to happen. When we have robots on construction sites, it's going to make a difference because then you have, yes, there's liability, but imagine the liability that goes away, right? Imagine the
Oh, I see.
accidents that go away. Imagine the back injuries that go away. Imagine that you're now working 24/7. So you have workforce that's working 24/7.
The
So
workforce, the robots are working 24
the
7.
robots work 24/7. And then their power is only increasing. Nobody gets tired. So imagine all the mistakes that people make when you're working at heights, like the pressure that you're under when you're welding at a height. A robot does that. Can there be a computational error? Maybe, but there is also then cameras that can, a lot more accurate than your eyes, assess the welding that you're doing or the installation that you're doing. So it's a battle we're not going to win. It's a battle we're not going to win. So we might as well accept it and then look at where do we go from here? What are the different jobs that are going to be created? What are the different ways people can still add value? Because laying bricks may not be it. Maybe installing drywall may not be it. It could be new material that we create because we are still building with the same material. That's the whole other thing. There's innovation that needs to happen in the whole.
That's a good question. Are we actually doing that? And what you just said reminds me of something I read from, I think it was in Ray Dalio's The Principles book, which he claims that all of us have a biased tendency of thinking the future is going to be slightly different version of our current situation. But I guess what you're saying is that future could be so much different that we don't really necessarily have an understanding of what that even looks like. Which reminds me of another example of someone else who, with which I think relates to this. I heard someone saying, imagine that right now you're getting your iPhone 17 or 16 or 17 and 18 once a year. It updates once a year. You have enough time to catch up with it. There's probably very slight changes from year to year. But then imagine if it was getting updated every week or every day or every hour or every minute. You basically, at some point, you just give up on getting up to date with that thing because it just keeps evolving and you can't really imagine what it is evolving into. So that scares me a little bit. I have to be honest with you. But like you said,
But
it
look at
seems
the
like it's a
opportunity.
lost battle.
But look at the opportunity. I was at the Blueprint conference last week, real estate tech. There is a whole industry that's shaping now that's basically saying, I will deal with AI and I will tell you what to use. So it's an AI consultant, which
Interesting.
I think that industry did not exist 6 months ago, as I know. But this industry is now saying, okay, you know what? We'll evaluate the tools. We know your industry. We know your company. So these are the tech enthusiasts now coming out of the individual firms into a different layer and saying that let us now test everything and we'll tell you what you can use. So we basically, the same way you have headhunters, you now have tech hunters. So it's like there's different industries. I firmly believe
Very
that the
interesting.
biggest jobs that are going to be in the market 5 years from now, we can't even imagine. We just got
Yeah,
to be on
that's a
the
fair
right
statement.
track. And for landlords, going back to landlords, that's what we've done. I don't know what people want to do with land logic, but what we did know is that whoever controls the data stream, there is value in that because it doesn't matter what you want to do, you need data, right? So that's why we decided, you know what, let's build the foundation layer. Let other people come in, let's enable others to come in and build applications left and right, but everybody needs the data layer. So it's like being able to imagine what the future might look like and what are the different things that you can put in place that could support that. There was an interview by the CEO of Amazon, and the guy was saying, what we know about the future is that customers want products faster and they want products cheaper. That's not going to change. We don't know what the future is going to look like. You might have a 3D printer at home that prints everything you want. Doesn't matter. If it's cheaper and if it's faster, then maybe.
Right.
This is these fundamentals we need to think about. So when it comes to real estate, every one of us, most of us, have real estate as our biggest asset, right?
Right.
We're gonna want to know what to do with that asset. So coming up with the highest and best potential of my biggest asset is a thing that I'm going to care about, regardless of how much technology is going to evolve, right? Now, can you build solutions that help me to tell me, can I build a garden suite in my backyard? Can I build a fiveplex on my lot? Can I merge with my neighbor and build a high rise? If you can give me that information, I would want to know that information because that protects my investment, right? It's like being able to me when it comes to technology in our sector is like being able to understand what the future needs are. Robotics, we need robotics. Prefabrication, 100%, right? New materials, no way around it, right? Energy efficiency, absolutely. There's core things that we know we have to work on. We don't know what the end result is going to look like, but as long as you're on the right path, as you go up, then you see horizons that you couldn't see before. That I really believe in that personally. That you know what, you just got to continue on the path that you think is the right path, and
Very
but the
interesting.
specific opportunities will come to you once you get to a certain height that you can actually have that visibility. And
You-
other things are evolving too.
You're beginning to sound like a priest or a religious person. You basically have to have faith and keep going and make sure that you're putting your best foot forward and trying
The,
to keep up with it. And
I
yeah,
guess the
I
only
hear
difference
you.
there, the only difference to the religion is that you got to keep your eyes open, and
Yes.
you gotta be able to adjust and pivot, right? You need to understand what's happening around you, and you need to adjust accordingly because there are things happening that are like other parts of the world are doing things, right? And we can only get away so long by saying, oh, Canada is behind these many years and that many years. That gap is widening. So we have industry
We're
partners here in
basically going to be
Toronto.
left in the dust.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And anyway, that's my 2 cents on topic.
That's pretty good. And hopefully, we're not scaring people off the podcast right now.
It's okay to be scared a little bit, I think, you
No,
know?
I agree. That was my next question. So what are your suggestions if let's assume that what we just discussed with that train of thought and let's give it a time frame of I don't know 5 to 7 years that we and time 5 to 7 years for call it massive disruption. And I don't know necessarily what that massive disruption looks like. I don't think anyone does. You being at the cutting edge of technology, trying to merge technology with our industry, are there any low hanging fruits that you see that, you know what, if you're an architect, if you're a realtor, if you're a developer, if you're an engineer, go learn this, go invest in that, hang out with these types of places or people? Are there any low hanging fruits that you can guide our audience to?
It's a good question. I don't have a good answer to. I think the good news for those who are afraid of change is that you're in the best place on earth because I don't think there's any other jurisdiction that's this slow in adopting technology. So your safest place is here. Stay here.
Probably one of the very few times that it's going to work for us.
Yeah. So if you're scared of change, you're in the best place you can be. But I think again, also depends where you are in your career, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're mid-career onwards, there is going to be enough slow adopters that, especially here, that you'll be okay, right? There's going to be today. Today we have paper-based municipalities in Ontario, right?
Right.
So you'll be okay for a while.
You're
If you're
really selling the case for Canada for our international listeners here. Yes. Okay. Go ahead.
do not, yeah, actually, there's a lot of opportunity if you want to
Oh,
think of
that's
it
what
that
I
way.
mean. Like, if you want to get away from changes, maybe here's a destination for you to come.
Hopefully, that's not going to stay for too long. But if you're early in your career, I think you just got to accept the facts that technology is happening there and it's coming and it's becoming less and less complicated. Before, you may have to learn coding, computer programming. Right now, you just need to talk to ChatGPT. I mean,
Yeah, it
it's
doesn't get
getting
easier than that.
easier. It's getting easier and easier. So I think the good news here is that yes, technology is advancing, but the interface, the human computer interaction is also evolving. So it's becoming a lot easier and easier to deal with technology, right? So in many ways, if you wait a few years, then you got glasses that you talk to, and then you're not touching a computer. Because I know that the older generation, they always had a problem with, I don't want to touch computers. But if you just want to talk, right? If you have
Right.
glasses that you just talk to, then it might become easier. So there's a whole industry around human computer interaction that I think is going to be a big player in what happens to our industry and other industries. Because I think the computing power has been there and has been there for a while. It's been the interaction to that computer power that's been a problem. Right? But once the interaction problem gets solved, then I think adoption would be a lot faster. So I think if
Right.
somebody wants to have a niche area of, I think that human computer interaction, it's an area that's going to see a lot of changeover, a lot of activity over the next generation to come, because that's the bottleneck right now, right?
Right.
Computing power has gone forward. There's a lot of problems. We just need to be able to communicate better,
Connect the
right?
two dots together. And what
Yeah.
you said reminds me of something that happened about 35 years ago when I was 5, 6 years old. And I remember my parents both being an architect were trying to bring themselves to use and learn and use AutoCAD for the first time. This was AutoCAD 7, I want to say, or even earlier. And so there was a whole process, like trying and learn AutoCAD, which involved trying to learn actually using a computer, which we didn't have before that. So that was a huge barrier to entry. And yes, side note is that they end up hiring a tutor who would come to our house and train both of them, which made me learn AutoCAD before I went to grade 1, which was a fun
Oh, wow.
experience to have. But that side note, aside from that side note, there was a whole industry that was formed around basically transitioning the old school architect and engineer from paper and drawing tables and everything that goes with that to using AutoCAD and related tools. And it's probably going to be here, like you said, there's going to be another wave of that coming. It's this time it's probably going to be smaller and the transition will probably happen a little bit faster. This is pretty interesting, and I'm sure you and I can sit here and talk for a while, but this has gone long enough. Are there any parting thoughts that you want to share with our audience about the trends you're seeing, the concerns, the opportunities? And I think this is one of those conversations that you and I probably have to revisit in about a year and see where we go from there.
No, it's changing very rapidly, of course. I think the last thought just put everybody's head is there is opportunities. That there are opportunities out there with all the change that's happening. Construction industry as a whole, in my opinion, has done worse than construction tech industry. If we look at some of the players in the tech industry, they've done a lot better than the construction industry players themselves, but they're sell to construction players, right? So the
True,
irony there is
true,
interesting.
very true.
So I think what our industry needs to understand is that it's construction tech is happening, right? And those who are playing that game are on the back on your back and benefiting a lot more than you are. So there is two ways you can do it. You can fight them and you're gonna lose, or you can invest in them. So I want to encourage our industry to start thinking about investing in tech, right? There is more than one way you can do it. You can support startups. There's many of them out there. You can become early adopters of startups. You can put your money in the startups. And by putting the money in them and also supporting them at the same time, then you're helping them grow. So you're protecting your own investment, right?
Right.
So that is our next chapter. And I'm going to put a hook here for our own eco venture fund. It's basically trying to create a fund that people can invest in, and the fund would then go out there and pick the startups that, because again, investors picking up startups, there is a gap there as well. That's where funds exist.
Which makes sense because if you're going to invest in something and if you use it, you're basically helping debug and grow it. Like, why wouldn't you? I know, and going back to what you said, I don't want to name names here, but there are certain software providers and technology providers in the industry which basically we started using about 10 years ago, and you get hooked up, you're working on it, and your whole company is running on them, and all of a sudden overnight you get an email saying, yeah, listen, next year when you're renewing contract, our price has gone up 10 times. And at that point in time, because frankly, we don't have too many alternatives, or I should say any other alternatives to that one particular provider that I'm thinking about, you end up having to pay an arm and leg because there's not enough competition. There's not enough healthy competition in the market that he actually gives you choices. So I can attest to that. That's definitely competition is always good. Here's one of
Be
those areas.
endorse the technology, invest in it if you can, be a part of it, be an advisor, be an early customer. There is many ways startups are looking for adoption from the industry, right? So I know not everybody can test everything, but in your firm, pick a couple of technologies, test them out, and if you think you can help them grow, then invest in them. And that'll probably be a better investment than investing in a house or land or a condo or anything else. And I
Right.
think the real estate market kind of showed that real estate investments go up and down.
Yeah.
Sometimes tech investments can do better. But anyway,
These-
that's my pitch to
That's
whoever
pretty good.
is
I'm gonna
support
put
the
it.
startups, support the technology providers. Don't fight it. It's gonna happen. Be a part of
Yeah.
it.
I'm gonna plug a disclaimer here. Just talk to your financial advisor or you legal accountant person before you make any financial decisions. Don't come after us later if that doesn't work out. Thank you,
Uh,
Arash. This has been fun, a lot of fun. Where can people find you?
Arash at landlogic.ai. That's where I
Awesome.
hide. So reach out to
Perfect.
me. If you have ideas you want to explore, whether it's in LandLogic or otherwise, if you want to test some of our technologies, you can also look at ecoinnovationlab.com. There's a whole bunch of different companies there that we've been a part of and have supported. And if you have ideas, come to us. If you want to try them, come to us. If you want to invest, come to us. Let us help you
You're going
mitigate.
to be busier than before. You've been pretty busy so far, but you're going to be even busier.
I've got a big
Thank you
team
very
behind
much.
me that's willing to support. So thank you so much, Payam, for this. This was very entertaining, and
Yes.
I really
And
enjoyed our
and
conversation.
informative for me.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And we hope that everyone who's listened so far enjoyed the show. Thank you, everyone.